Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we are going to take a look at Venus in Virgo, who is approaching an opposition to Saturn in the sign of Pisces. Now, this is just one of a number of aspects that are all forming around a very busy full moon, which we will also be looking at to close out the week. But today, I want to spend a little bit of time with Venus opposite Saturn because it is one of the more acute aspects forming over the weekend, and most of us will probably notice this one standing out among the rest. Venus Saturn oppositions just they tend to stand out. So we'll see why today as we explore this archetypal combination and give you some things to watch for. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. We are trying to get to 70,000 subscribers on this channel. My initial goal was the fall equinox, but it was, I don't know, I just made it up. So, but let's see if we can get there. Let's see how close we can get. And if not, then we'll just keep pushing and see how long it takes us to get there. But it seemed like a good benchmark to shoot for, especially when we noticed that a large number of people who watch the channel regularly are not yet subscribed. So if that's you and you don't mind subscribing to help us grow our community, our business, and our channel, we really appreciate it. You can find transcripts of any of my daily talks on the website, nightlightastrology.com. We are running a sale on a brand new beginner's course that we have, and I want to take you over to the website and show you that right now. So if you go over to the website, nightlightastrology.com, and click on the courses tab, you will see that we have a new course called Astrology Essentials. This will be dropping September 15th. So this is a pre-sale that will save you a significant amount of money off the course, the cost of the course. See at the bottom, you can enroll, and you will be set up on a website that hosts all of the recordings. There are 8 modules. They're all recorded. So this isn't a live class. This is a recorded class. You can follow along at your own pace. The pre-sale lasts until August 27th. So you have this week and next to take advantage of it. And this is a great course for people who are just beginning their journey with astrology and looking for something to help them understand the basic language that they're learning. Most people come into our advanced training programs, our year 1, 2, 3, our horary course with a little prior knowledge or background. And we realized that there was a whole demographic of people out there who needed something to get started with, like very, very basic stuff. So this is a very, very basic course for total beginners. You, a friend, your spouse, whoever might not know anything about astrology and want like a very basic, what is this? How does it work? What are the basic elements of the language? How do they work together? And we have some other modules built in that can also help you learn and grow more with your own studies. For example, we have a module on horoscopes and astrological content creators that kind of gives you some guidelines as to how to understand what kind of astrology you're following in the different content creations that are content creators and channels that you listen to, as well as how horoscopes work, so you can understand more about how to take advantage of them when you listen to them. We also have a module called The Best Ways to Learn Astrology, which really gives you some tools to go forward on your own, in addition to obviously recommending our programs and what kinds of programs we recommend or what features of programs we recommend in general. So this is a really comprehensive, good, solid introduction, and I hope people will be able to take advantage of it. Again, the early bird payment, this pre-sale, lasts 2 weeks until August 27th, and then it will be released on September 15th, at which point the regular sale price will be available. So the regular course costs will be posted. So the other thing, oops, I almost forgot. We have a live webinar coming up next week on the 8th house. So let me take you back over and just show you how to register for that. Go to the events tab, click on live talks, and you will see that on August 22nd, I'm giving a talk on the 8th house, the place of karmic debts. A lot of people have, there are many misunderstandings and misconceptions about the 8th house. We're going to be talking about the ancient meaning of this house and why this house is associated with karmic debts and some of the most important karmic contracts that we have with other people in this lifetime. And we'll give you some of the background and rationale behind that and help you understand how to read your own 8th house in your chart. And hopefully get rid of some fear along the way, because there is a lot of fear and anxiety that's often associated with the 8th house. So anyway, when you register for that, by the way, you get a link to attend. And if you can't make it live, then you'll get the recording afterward. Okay, so let us turn our attention now to the real-time clock, and we are going to look forward at the formation of Venus's opposition to Saturn. So here we can see on the real-time clock that today, Thursday, August 15th, while we have Saturn and Mars squaring, which we talked about already this week. And you could go back and listen to that for today if you want some reminders about that big transit that is in the process of perfecting today, as well as Jupiter, Saturn, Jupiter square to Saturn. But what we're going to do is look forward. Oh, the big arrows here. We're going to look forward to this aspect, which is Venus in Virgo within about 4 degrees right now of an opposition to Saturn. Let's take this forward in time and watch how it perfects. So it gets to within the 3-degree engagement range tomorrow, August 16th, which is when the karmic fruit starts appearing on the tree and then falls off within that 3-degree separation range. Usually you'll feel it most acutely when it's almost exact. So we get to Saturday, August 17th, it's within 2 degrees. Sunday, August 18th, it's within about 1 degree. And by Monday afternoon, it's just passed through the opposition. So between Sunday the 18th and Monday the 19th of August, you'll see this Venus-Saturn opposition perfecting. Of course, it's interesting that Venus hits a square to Jupiter in the process. I talked about that in tomorrow's video that you'll see on the busy full moon that we have coming through over the weekend in Aquarius, which also creates a T-square with Uranus. So really, Venus is implicated in a lot more than just an opposition to Saturn. But today we're going to kind of isolate Venus and Saturn so we get a really good feel for what they're saying and what they're doing. Okay, so we see then if we give Venus about a 3-degree range of separation, that takes her to Wednesday, August 21st. So if you put that all together, you have Friday through Wednesday as the period within which you'll really be feeling and experiencing the karmic fruits or harvesting of this aspect, and some more than others, as always, depending on your birth chart and where things land in your birth chart, which is a super important consideration. Look at the whole sign houses of Virgo and Pisces, or Virgo, Pisces, Gemini, which we went over in our horoscopes of the month. So today we're going to look at 5 things to watch for given Venus's opposition to Saturn, which is in an archetypal vacuum, a really significant aspect, and one that, although it participates in a much greater context, a very busy and dynamic series of aspects happening around it, we can still notice these themes that are quintessential Venus-Saturn themes. So let's start with number 1, placing limits or boundaries on Venus, or the theme of Venus reaching a point of greater maturation. So when we translate that, we're just saying, when I say placing limits or boundaries on Venus, what I mean is on anything that Venus signifies. So for example, if in your particular chart, let's say like I can already reflect on this from my own chart because it happens to be in the 5th house, which is the place of children. And we're going through a process of having to set various boundaries and new rules and expectations on our kids around bedtime because they're growing up. And so it's like there's different, they're getting to stay up a little bit later. They have a little bit more independent time around bed with reading. And so there's like it's like a new structure that's being set up with respect to my kids. That's happening in my 5th house, right? So Venus is traveling through my 5th. Anyhow, the point is that whatever Venus represents, like in my 5th house right now, Venus, one of its natural significations is daughters. Venus represents sisters and daughters and women in general. So Venus in Virgo in the 5th house is about helping my kids deal with their bedtime anxiety through some new rituals and routines and stuff like that. It's just very, very basic. I'm sure other stuff will come up too because I'm recording this about a week in advance, as I always do. But the point is that Venus can signify a great variety of different things, and you're thinking about the potential for limits or boundaries or rules or discipline or structure to be provided for Venus through some kind of oppositional tension, which might mean that Venus needs it but doesn't want it. Let's say that you're a high school student and you really like someone and you're really anxious about the connection. And so you're texting the person all the time. A Venus opposite Saturn in that context might mean that you're having to place some limits on yourself in terms of how much you text and how much you let your anxiety take over within the relationship. So this could be a moment of maturation. The structure and discipline might not be easy because you'd rather just let your anxiety take the steering wheel because it's hard not to. But this might be a moment where there's some need for some structure, some boundaries, some maturing, some growing up for anything signified by Venus: love, sex, relationships, pleasure, the pleasure impulse. Oh, I'm going to Suddenly I'm going to count my macros. I'm going to come up with a macro plan and a calorie plan and track it. Some people that may not be a good idea. Like everyone's a little bit different, you know. Sometimes the more you obsess and track things, the worse it is. And so you could also see Venus being polarized by Saturn. And the second thing I have here is Venus asking Saturn to loosen up. Venus Saturn comes together and it's like, you need to count your calories and, you know, weigh yourself every day, or I don't know, it's just, you know, something very strict with respect to your health or your beauty. Maybe just lighten up a little bit, you know. So Venus can push in the opposite direction and say, Venus in Virgo especially, who will sometimes struggle with issues of purity or perfectionism. Venus in Virgo might say to Saturn, hey, look, I already struggle enough with being hard on myself or being overly critical. I don't need any more of this. So it could be a moment where we're having to face some kind of rigidity within ourselves or with anything related to Venus. If you are an artist, this might be about loosening up within the way that you play or within the style or approach that you take to art in general. There could be some way in which you need to loosen up with respect to pleasure. Hey, you know what? Just be the one to initiate sex once in a while, you know, and don't be afraid, you know, let yourself feel freer with respect to intimacy, you know, something like that. On the other hand, it might be the case that, you know, Venus and Saturn oppose. We go back to number one, placing limits or boundaries on Venus or maturation and love. And you say, gosh, I have a hard time saying no to sweets at night. And then I wonder why I have trouble sleeping, you know, because I've got sugar and I've got carbs working through my system. It keeps my brain awake, processing everything. So maybe I need to put a limit on, you know, after a certain time, I don't eat anything that'll keep me up, you know, something like that. Now, all of these are made up examples, so don't feel I don't want to put anyone on trial here. I'm just giving examples, right? So if you eat sugar at night and you're feeling okay about it, you just do you. I can't personally, but that's me. I have a really sensitive nervous system that keep me up all night. All right. So placing limits or boundaries on Venus or maturation and love can also mean that a relationship is reaching an important moment of greater maturation, which could mean deeper commitment. A lot of Venus-Saturn dynamics result in the vows of marriage, the commitment to until death do us part, which is very serious. There's a gravitas to the vows of a relationship, to commitment and to saying, I choose you to the exclusion of everyone and everything else. Like that kind of, and not that everyone is necessarily monogamous, but you get the idea that Venus-Saturn can be about, you know, a kind of greater maturity, focus, or commitment that's coming up in love. It can also be about the deepening of intimacy through serious or weighty things that a couple has to face and deal with together. Like people get scared of Venus-Saturn dynamics, especially squares and oppositions, conjunctions as well, because they think, God, my relationship's going to end. You know, most of the time I don't see relationships ending, although that does happen. I see people having to deal with heavy, weighty, serious things and then growing deeper in the connection because of having carried something heavy together. And it could be that it's not even related to your relationship, that it's something that your partner is going through in their family or their job or their health. And you work and walk that path together. And then you grow, the commitment grows more solid. It crystallizes in new ways. So some really beautiful things here. Venus asking Saturn to loosen up can also be, remember the two planets when they're opposed have a kind of polarizing effect. And so Venus can look at Saturn and just go, there's too much weight or expectation or structure or seriousness, or there's too much duty or rules, and I need something looser or freer, which Venus in Virgo typically is already inclined to work toward as a lesson, because Venus in Virgo is often struggling with the kind of puritanical evaluation of things that is naturally contrary to the sensuality of Venus. Like Mercury and Virgo are the ruler of Virgo are very analytical, and there's a tendency in Virgo to be really good at judgment and evaluation, criticism, editing, meticulous care and attention to details and getting things right and being effective. Like all the gifts of Virgo are kind of contrary in some ways to the ease, flow, sensual enjoyment of Venus. Not that they can't work together, but it's just to say that Venus is often working on loosening up when she's in Virgo. It's like that's one of the tensions that's there. I always call on this example from Saturday Night Live. Great Venus and Virgo character that they would like mock on Saturday Night Live was Martha Stewart. And they had like her Christmas special where she was walking around showing how perfectly beautiful everything was, but she was like an automaton and she had her shirt off and it was acting like deadpan, like she had no idea that she had her shirt off. That's like a perfect archetypal comedic display of Venus and Virgo. And getting at something that's obviously, I don't think anyone should judge someone, but like it's obviously a funny thing about someone who sort of has this perfect aesthetic but is rather uptight. So, Venus and Virgo can be working on loosening up as a matter of its own archetypal journey, and then throw in an opposition to Saturn, and that will be the breaking point where Venus says, look, I can't be this uptight. Number 3 is the polarization of values in relationships. Venus opposite Saturn can represent a clashing of desires of what we judge to be beautiful or desirable or pleasurable. Venus represents what we love, what we value, what we treasure, what we like. It's the thumbs up button from our soul. And when Venus hits an opposition to Saturn, it's as though what we like comes into conflict or is polarized with someone or something else. And so tremendous value conflicts can come up around Venus's opposition to Saturn. And that can be challenging on relationships of any kind, but often it comes up in partnerships or any kind of intimate relationship. And it creates a kind of crossroads. Like, how are we going to meet? How are we going to meet in the middle and compromise? How am I going to work, live, love with someone who has a very different way of looking at things compared to myself? And sometimes this kind of crossroads will provide an exit, like an exit ramp for someone to get out of a relationship, which is why sometimes relationships do end around Venus-Saturn oppositions. Saturn represents death, and Saturn represents decay. And so Venus in her fall opposite Saturn can mean that, yeah, there's some big endings in relationships. Number 4 is a crossroad or decision with respect to Venus. When Venus reaches the opposition to Saturn, it's as though she's hitting a limit, or she's at a threshold or a gateway between one world and another. And that can result in making a big choice or decision, usually rooted in values, usually involving other people in relationships, and looking at what you're going to prioritize in terms of pleasure and happiness going forward. So a crossroads or big decision with respect to Venus, that could be also in the mix in these next days. And then finally, issues of belonging. When Venus is opposite Saturn, Venus can feel unlovable or rejected. That's really hard in love. Like Venus-Saturn transits will often occur when someone has had an affair, the other person finds out, and they feel tremendously betrayed, abandoned, and like degraded or rejected somehow. Of course, that's a really extreme example, but another more common issue would be not feeling connected, feeling disconnected, feeling alone, feeling lonely, feeling abandoned, not liking being alone. Like Venus in Virgo especially brings to mind the virgin goddesses that the sign of Virgo is very much connected to. And those goddesses were not they weren't like prude. They were very sensual, but they didn't marry. They couldn't belong to anyone. And so I also wonder about the need for independence and space within a relationship, and the fact that that can also make people feel alone or abandoned or even betrayed. Like if someone is not being careful with the amount of alone time they take or how they take it, the people that they love can also feel left behind. On the other hand, if you can't give people room and space for themselves, that's problematic as well. But issues of belonging, of feeling connected versus feeling isolated in a larger social context or within intimate relationships is also very much at play during this Venus-Saturn opposition, you might say. So connection, disconnection, loneliness versus feeling attached. Issues around avoidance versus anxious attachment. Very Venus opposite Saturn. It could go either way too. I would also say that Venus Saturn brings up the need to look at deeper, heavier things in relationships, in the dynamics of relationships, in order to grow and mature. It's sort of like Saturn often works by negation. No, this won't work. No, that won't work. No, that won't work. Well, what will? I don't know, but not that. And sometimes that's the first step, and it's the best first step we can take. So anyway, these are different things to watch for as Venus opposes Saturn in the mix of all of these major aspects unfolding over the weekend. We will be taking a look at that full moon and all of these busy dynamics again over the weekend. And then Monday and Tuesday next week, we'll be hitting all of them again, just kind of taking them in at a deeper level. Don't forget the beginner's course on sale through August 27th. The pre-sale for that course, it released September 15th. If you're new to astrology, you're just learning it, you're getting excited, you want some way of putting it together, you listen to my channel a lot. It's nice to also have astrology explained by one of the content creators that you listen to regularly. Certainly some of my very first formative experiences as a student of astrology came from teachers whose content I also followed. Back then it was like newsletters, which is funny because there wasn't like as much YouTube content or podcasts and stuff like that. But regardless, I think it's always a good idea to get a very, very basic beginner's course started when you're young and young into your adventure with astrology, because it'll just put a lot of things together for you and allow you deeper, immediate access to the content that you're starting to really like. And it'll also prepare you to take, say, our year 1 course, our year 2 course, and not feel like everyone else is totally ahead of you because they've already explored and gotten this very beginner's grasp on things. So anyway, I hope you'll check that out. And don't forget, on August 22nd, my talk on the 8th house is coming up. Hope to see you guys there. We'll see you again tomorrow. Bye, everyone.